Hello, and welcome to the 2025 Accountability Indicator Overview Training. My name is Shara Savage, and I serve as the Director in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. Today's training will help you to better understand how each indicator contributes to Kentucky's overall accountability system. Let's get started. Let's take a quick look at what we'll be covering in today's training. We'll start with an introduction to Kentucky's accountability system to set the stage for how all the pieces fit together. Next, we'll dive into the concepts of status and change. Then we'll review federal classifications, including updates for identification beginning in 2025, this fall. After that, we'll talk about the tentative timeline for the 2025 data reporting. We'll also go over House Bill 6. And finally, we'll wrap up with sharing some resources that can help support your understanding of assessment and accountability. Let's get started. Let's take a look at the introduction of Kentucky's accountability system. The Office of Assessment and Accountability developed this glossary of terms to assist educators when referencing and discussing the accountability system. Please note that additional definitions have been added to the glossary based on the new components coming into accountability system this year. Let's start with an overview of Kentucky's accountability system, which became effective on November 30th, 2021 through 703 KAR 5270. The exclusive list of accountability indicators are based on status, current year performance, and change, the difference between the prior year and the current year status score. The indicators include state assessment results in reading and mathematics, results in science, social studies, and writing, including on-demand and editing and mechanics, progress for English language proficiency for English learners, results from the Quality of School Climate and Safety Survey, post-secondary readiness, and graduation rate, which apply at the high school level. These are rolled into an overall performance rating, giving a comprehensive snapshot of school and district performance. What's new this year is the introduction of two distinct calculations for change in performance as outlined in KRS 1586455. There will now be two distinct methods for determining change in performance depending on the context. Let's look closely at the wording of the statute for state. Status and change shall receive equal weight in determining overall performance for all students as a group and separately for individual groups. Status shall be determined by using the current year performance, and change shall be determined by using the difference in performance from the prior year to the current year. Our accountability system balances two components equally: status, which reflects current year performance, and change, which measures the improvement over time. The calculation of change based on the difference between the current and prior year will be used to determine state accountability results. This includes the identification of colors for each indicator. Indicator overall performance ratings are based on combined change and status ratings. State results will be used to determine the color-coded performance levels displayed in the school report card. Therefore, the state accountability yields colors. Let's look at the federal classification. Except that change shall be based on the difference in performance for the prior 3 years for purpose of determining the lowest performing 5% of schools under subsections 2 and 3 of Section 2 of this Act. Senate Bill 158 requires that for identifying these lowest performing schools, 3 years of prior data must be used to calculate change. For the specific purpose of identifying the lowest performing 5% of schools, the calculation of change will be based on a 3-year trend, comparing the current year to performance over the prior 3 years. For continuous support and improvement, CSI, targeted support and improvement, TSI, and additional targeted support and improvement, ATSI, identification specifically, change is based on a 3-year average difference in performance, ensuring a more stable long-term view of progress. Therefore, the highlighted section on this slide is important, as this is the first year that 3 years of change data is available, which means we can now use that information to fully apply this part of the accountability system. It is important to remember that the federal accountability yields classifications. Now let's take a look at the state overall accountability. Based on the weights approved by the Kentucky Board of Education, let's take a closer look at how performance is communicated within the Kentucky's accountability system. Each school receives an overall performance score based on the required state indicators for elementary, middle, and high school levels. These scores are then converted into a color-coded rating that offer a visual, easy to understand summary of how a school is performing. There are 5 color ratings, 5 colored levels ranging from red, which represents the lowest level of performance, to blue, which indicates the highest level of performance. Let's review how each component of the accountability system contributes to the overall performance rating at each school level. This chart outlines the weighting of each indicator, meaning how much each contribute to the overall accountability score at the elementary, middle, and high school levels. You'll also notice the note at the bottom. If an indicator is not available, its weight will be redistributed proportionally among the remaining indicators to ensure the overall rating still reflects all available data. The calculation of the change score is relatively straightforward. We need to subtract the prior year's status score from the current year's status score. You can see the formula here on the screen, which shows the calculation. The current year's status score minus the prior year's status score equals the state change score. Although basic, this calculation is important because it's the process we'll use to calculate change for each indicator. Notably, while we utilize the prior year's status score to calculate change scores, these scores do not directly impact our indicator performance rating. Their primary function is to provide us with a benchmark or point of comparison. For more detailed look at how these indicators are calculated and reported, please be sure to visit each of the indicator training modules. I will add these two scores together, 66.9 plus 1.9, to give me an indicator score of 68.8. On the next slide, I'm going to show you how all these scores come together. So let's take a closer look at how the overall state performance score is calculated for elementary schools using the accountability indicators. Each of these indicator scores are multiplied by its respective weight. Then we add all the indicators together to create the overall state performance score. And here is a look of how the overall state performance score is calculated at the middle school level. Here is a look of how the overall state performance score is calculated at the high school level. Now let's take a look at how the indicator performance ratings are determined based on the combination of status and change. On the left-hand side of the table is the status in the current year, with levels very high to very low. Across the top of the table is change, with indicator levels of declined significantly to increased significantly. Your indicator performance rating will be where the status and change intersect on the table. This slide provides the overall performance rating cut scores that was set in 2023, and they have not changed. Now let's take a closer look at those federal classifications. As a reminder, federal classifications are a crucial component of our state accountability system and are required under the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA. Targeted Support and Improvements, or TSI, identification must occur annually and ensure schools are receiving appropriate support. Starting in the fall of 2025, schools identified for comprehensive support and improvement, both CSI 1 and CSI 2, will also be identified on an annual basis. While 2025 is already a scheduled identification year, it's important to note that this change in the frequency of CSI identification is new and comes as a result of House Bill 298. As a reminder, the state change is calculated by subtracting the current year's status score from the prior year's status score, equaling change. That gives you the state change score. And once you have your state change score, the current year status score is added to the change score, giving you the state indicator score. Let's take a moment to walk through how the federal change score is calculated. As you can see on your slide, the federal change score is based on the average of the state change scores. We begin by identifying the state change score from 2 years ago, 2023, and add the state change score from prior year, 2024. And finally, we include the current year state change score from 2025. Once these three values are added together, the total is divided by the number of years of available data, typically ranging from 1 to 3 years. This gives us the federal change score, which is then used in federal accountability determinations. Please note that if the 3 years of change data are not available, all available change scores will be used to calculate the federal change score. Now, let's take a look at an example to see how this works in practice. This chart illustrates the status scores for each year along with the corresponding year-to-year change. So in the status column, you will find from years ranging from 2022, 2023, 2024, and this year, the current year, 2025. You have status scores available: 68, 66, 71, and 70. In the state change column, we have the year-to-year change. We have a -2 for year 23. We have a +5 for year 24 and a -1 for year 25. To find the average change, we add all 3 years of change data, -2 plus 5 plus -1, and divide that number by the number of years of available state change data, which is 3. That gives us a federal change score of 0.67, which is rounded to 1 decimal point, giving us 0.7 as our average federal change score for this indicator. So now I'm going to use the scores that we calculated in the previous slide as an example for how we'll calculate an indicator score. We determined that 66.9 was the current year status score, and 0.7 was the federal change score. So I'll add the two scores together, 66.9 plus 7.7, to give us a federal indicator score of 67.6. This slide demonstrates how the average change is calculated when the data is missing. In this case, you'll notice that in 22, the status is NA. This means there was no data available for that year, so we do not include it in the federal change classification. In 23, we have a status of 60. In 24, this improved to 65, representing a state change of 5 points. Then in 25, the current year, the status increases again to 68, which is a 3-point improvement from the previous year. To calculate the federal change, we add the 2 years of state change that is available, which is 5 and 3 for years 24 and 25. We add those together, and then we divide by 2 because we have 2 years of state change data available, which equals 4. So our average federal change for this indicator is 4. In this scenario, we have data in 22 and 23, but there's no usable data in 24. So we only use the one valid change score, state change score, from 22 and to 23, because we can only use data from consecutive years. As a result, the federal change is based only on 1 year, one valid year of difference. Therefore, the calculation is 5 divided by 1, which equals 5. In this example, it shows how the federal change is calculated when a student demographic group falls below the required N count in prior years. In 22 and 24, the group did not meet the minimum N count, so no data was reported, resulting in a score of 0. In 23, the group had enough students to meet the reporting threshold, and the status was 60. In 25, they again met the N count, and the status increased to 68. Because there was not enough valid consecutive years of data to calculate year-to-year changes, we cannot compute a reliable change score. Therefore, for 2025, the federal change score is marked not applicable. Okay. Now let's take a look at how the overall performance score is calculated at the elementary school level. Each of these indicators combines current performance with the federal change score, which, as we discussed, is a 3-year average. If the 3 years of data are not available, all available change data will be used, as demonstrated in the previous slides. Once those individual weighted scores are calculated, they're added together to form the overall federal performance score. And so here is a look at how the federal performance score is calculated at the middle school level. And here is a look at how the federal performance score is calculated at the high school level. So now let's take a look at the fall 2025 reporting. Currently, data that's currently in the districts is Access, alternate access, the ACT data, K-Screen data, and components of the post-secondary readiness. Student data coming in early August is the alternate Kentucky Summative Assessment, AKSA, and the Kentucky Summative Assessment, KSA, minus the science scores. The science scores are delayed due to not having set the standard setting for science, the standard setting for science will occur the first week of September. As we look ahead to this year's assessment data reporting, here is a tentative timeline we're working from. We begin with the release of the student data the week of August 4th, where both KSA and AKSA data will be available in Pearson Access Next PAN for districts. As I said in the previous slide, science scores will not be included in this data as the standard setting for science has not yet occurred. The science standard setting will be held in September. Now, because of this, you will notice that the timeline is a bit later than normal, and that is due to the standard setting needing to happen before we can release the data. So following the release of the available data for KSA and AKSA, we move into Fall Quality Control Data Review, which runs from August 13th to the 21st for new tickets and August 22nd for ticket resolution. Then on October 23rd, we will have our Quality Control Day when DACs will get their first look at accountability results. The embargoed release of accountability data to districts will occur mid to late November, which means DACs and selected district staff will have access to the data before it becomes public. Additionally, in mid to late November, we move into public reporting. The data will be available publicly. Finally, immediately following the public release, we enter into the 10-day regulatory data review period. This is the final opportunity for DACs to submit new tickets. And again, this is a tentative data reporting timeline. Now let's switch gears and take a look at House Bill 6 website requirements. As a reminder, last year, as part of the budget legislation, House Bill 6 was passed. House Bill 6 brought about new requirements for how districts and schools must display key academic information on their websites. The requirements you see on the slide are still in effect. As a reminder, districts have 14 days after public release to update their websites with the current reported data. And as always, we are still committed to offering assistance as needed to districts throughout this process. Let's take a look at the available resources for districts. We have the Accountability at a Glance link there for you as a resource. This concludes the Accountability Overview training. This training provided the foundational understanding of how the system works and how the indicators are used to measure performance. Be sure to visit each of these indicator training modules on the slide for a more detailed look at how these indicators are calculated and reported. And as always, if you have any questions, please email us at daceninfo@education.ky.gov or give us a call at 502-564-4394. Thank you for your time and attention here today.